there's always hope. Like, I was at the door of Googling ways to kill myself because I thought I was so bad for my family that they would be better off without me.
Hey everyone, welcome to Attempting Fatherhood. All right, well, let's get things kicked off. Curt, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've known you all of, 30 seconds so far, but I did a little bit of digging on your site. I was looking at the site. First off, good-looking dude. Great hair. Your site looks like it's like a model's landing page. It's just a single shot of you, so emotive and yet contemplative, and then it's like, by the way, I'm doing these things. Click below. I was like, this guy's up to some big stuff. This is how they roll in Canada.
That's right. Everyone rolls like that. Everyone's got their own personal landing page.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I was really interested in what you're about from, like, clearly your passion for dads goes beyond just like, yeah, man, like, I like to high-five dads when I see them. That's a great thing. All dads need that too. But yours is like becoming a bit of your actual work. I mean, for me, this is kind of like a side thing that I do to get to talk to dads. But this is your full-time gig, or it's at least part of it, like a big chunk of that. So tell me about how, like, you're a professional dad, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Well, yeah, thank you for all of that. I appreciate that. And obviously my ego loves exactly everything you said there. And that's why we do it, obviously. But
clearly.
But I mean, my story is basically like, I was just such a bad father for the first few years. And it felt like it was ruining every day of my life. Not having children, but the way I interacted with them. And it took me quite a while to figure out that there was another way to do things. And this led me to, you could call it all sorts of things, a path of self-discovery, an inner journey, inner work, self-healing, whatever you want to call it. And I figured out that there was a lot of unresolved stuff in my heart, in my psyche, that needed to be resolved, basically, so that I could show up for my kids without being triggered. And it all led to a successful journey. And obviously that's a lifelong thing. I'll never be sort of fully better. But man, I am no longer the single biggest issue in my kids' and my wife's life. And so in having gone through that journey, I came to a point where I was like, I think I could talk about this. And I think I want to help people because I thought it was hopeless. Like there's a number of really dark parts of my journey where it was like, there is no hope. There's no point for this. And all I can hope to do is just like maybe get through one more day. And I just felt compelled to share these things because I see a lot of sort of self-help people out there. They're typically single. They're typically like, oh, if you just have an 8-hour morning routine, things will be fine. And it's you know, dads don't get that. And the only thing I saw with dads was like, hey, dad, keep your chin up. Just do better, man. And it's like, look, as a dad, you're first of all a human being. That means you've potentially got wounds, traumas, social conditioning, whatever, that might be impacting how you show up in the world. And I thought, okay, let's marry these two things because I searched high and low and spent like way too much money and way too many hours reading and going to courses and getting coaching and all the rest of it. And I sort of pieced together all these different things that helped me and a lot of things that didn't. So what I want to do now is like try and give a space or a container for dads to work in, to maybe go through a similar sort of journey that I went through. And I see becoming a better dad as starting with becoming a better man. And that's just self-work, that's discovery, that's healing, that's being in a community of men. That's all the things that I've used. And so that's where it got to today. And it just so happens that people seem to be resonating with it. We've got men's groups, we're launching a community, we've got all that kind of stuff. So the so-called professional part just sort of happened.
Yeah. And what were you before this in terms of like income and according to the, whatever the Canadian IRS is?
Yeah, so I have had my own business for the last 10 years. It has been everything from mainly income-producing websites. So I would build or buy websites that earned affiliate income or advertising income, rank them on Google with SEO, and I even owned a number of physical product companies like a beard care company. We had brushes and beard oils and all that kind of stuff. And it's always been online entrepreneurship. And that's my so-called trade, if you will.
Yeah, well, that's quite a trade. I mean, it's like that's the equivalent of having like a business degree now coming out of college. Like online tradesmanship could be anything, and that's the beauty of it.
Precisely.
Well, let's get your dad stats. You had mentioned that you were the kind of the weakest link in your family's experience. What are your dad stats in terms of married, not married, kids, ages, all that?
Yeah, so I have been married for 10 years in 13 days. So that's coming up real soon.
Coming up.
And we have 3 boys, 9 years old, 7 years old, and 2 years old.
There we go. That's the getting you up at 3 a.m. because they're kicking around. That's that dad's life right there. Woo!
Yeah.
You mentioned that just a second ago, you were talking about kind of how this whole thing came up. Sorry, my light is flickering and burning my eyes. You mentioned kind of how this came up. Was there a moment? Was there a thing like you found yourself just like screaming at your kid and you were like, wait a sec? Like, was there a breaking point that you looked at, or was it just kind of gradual? Like you look back and you're like, I'm not the guy I thought I wanted to be, or I'm just curious how people make those changes and shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. It was acute, but it was acute every single day for years. It was like, oh no, this is terrible. What do I do? Why am I acting like this? But I was literally so ignorant to the possibilities. I was like, guess this is life. And so, yes, I noticed it along the way, and that's perhaps why it was more of a struggle for me, because I was like, oh man, every day I have to live with this. What is the point?
Yeah.
And the trigger for change, I suppose, is the most impactful part for me in this, is that I started meditating for business reasons. I heard someone say, I'm more productive in my business now. And I was like, yes, let's become more
I need productivity, whatever it
yes,
takes.
100%. So I downloaded this app. I was like, super woo-woo, whatever. I'm just going to get after it. I started meditating, and like 10 days in, I'm like, oh, this kind of feels good, interesting. My son comes around the corner. I can just remember being at the couch, comes around the corner, and I wish I could remember exactly what it was because it would make a better story. Maybe I'll just make it up one day. But he threw something, or he yelled at me, something that like was in my space. And normally I would have just screamed at him. That's just how I operated. I was mean, I was scary, I was big, I was angry. And I didn't. And I caught myself, but the internal bells started going like, oh my goodness, I think you stumbled across something, because you have literally never been able to hold yourself off when you wanted to scream at him before. And it was like this massive green light going off in my head, and I just went down that rabbit hole further and further and further, and it led me to everything I ended up doing. So yeah, it was like meditation for business changed my life as a family, as a father.
I love the fallout of that. What was the meditation? Was it just like breathing exercises? Was it like, envision your life? I mean, there's so many different types of meditations, and especially if this was more toward business, I'm curious kind of what looked like for you those first 10 days. Yeah,
you know what? It was straight up Headspace. It was just the Headspace app, and I downloaded that. I used that for a number of years. Lately, I've been using the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. I started recording meditations because that's how impactful it's been on me. I use Insight Timer. I've tried I don't even know, probably like 20 different styles of meditation, but it all started with very simple body scans and watch your breathing and count to 10. Like, that's how basic it was. And it just...
That's very Daniel Tiger of you. Count down to calm down.
That's right.
Oh, we know that one. That's a very big one here at our place.
Yeah.
Mostly for me, but also my kids.
Yeah, we just pretend
pretend
those shows are for the kids, and they're really.
I know.
For
I'm
us.
Back there taking notes. Like, 5, 4, 3. Okay. So hug yourself and then let it go. Let it go. Okay, great. Yeah. I'll do that next time. 100%. Are you paying attention, son? Yeah, you should. You paying attention?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, kind of like where your fathering came from. I always like to talk to my guests about their own journey of fatherhood and how that's been informed by their own dads. So I'm curious, kind of from your own childhood, what is something that your dad did that you loved, if he was around? We've had plenty of dads whose dads weren't around. And then something that maybe you're letting go of. And it could be that attitude that you were talking about before. It could be something else. I don't know. But I always like what have you learned from your dad that you're keeping, and what are you letting go?
Yeah, this is an excellent process for, I think, any man to go through. And in fact, we do something like this in men's group, where it's like you get to tell your dad's story and then be like, here's where I'm like him, here's where I'm not. And for me, great. The positive aspects are mostly his humor and lightness and silliness. And so I bring as much of that into the house as possible. And like, man, like movie quotes, like all sorts of stuff, and just being basically the stuff that my wife rolls her eyes at. Like, that's me. It makes the kids laugh. We're all
the dad
boys
jokes, that whole world. Yeah,
dude, I have my kids trying to out dad joke me. I'm like, son, don't even try.
I am a master Shaolin.
Yeah, and I learned from the best, so I really appreciate that about my dad. He was also physically available. And I mean, I work from home on purpose. I'm able to be with them literally whenever. And it's hard for me because I don't always want to be straight up.
Yeah.
But I can. And what I am letting go of is his emotional unavailability and his need for ever greater physical and financial success. And so
interesting.
He was always there and he was always fun, but there was very little active teaching. There was very little active emotional engagement, and I never saw him have friends. He was married like 4 different times, and so it was very much trading up for bigger and better homes, job, cars, wives, all those sorts of things. So I'm trying to let go of the need to continually get better externally, and focus more on being emotionally there for my kids, regardless of what that looks like, income-wise or property-wise.
That's interesting. And so you would see him kind of try to climb a ladder, like this isn't working, so I'm out as far as the marriage goes, and I need to prove my worth through a bigger house or a nicer car or whatever, that type of kind of concept.
Yeah, it was I almost
which is very human, by the way. Like no dish. I think everyone encounters that. Just some people, it's a little bit more obvious, I think.
Yeah, and when I look back, my perception of it was not so much chasing something, although perhaps that was, chasing the elusive good enough. And I think that's a very important question that we need to ask as fathers, especially to sons. Can we answer our child's question that, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? And John Eldridge talks about that in his book, Wild at Heart. But I saw it as my dad running from something. Always running from fear of the past. And maybe it is that same question, not being good enough. They can't see me if I got a new job. They'll never see me if I've got a new wife. I can't get too deep with anyone. Like, I never stayed in a school for more than, I think, like 2 years. And never stayed in, like, one city for more than 2 years, because he was like, new job, new job, new job, new job.
When he was moving, you weren't just talking about, like, transferring jobs. It was, like, totally
moving.
Reboot life every 2 years.
Three provinces, like, probably 20 cities. It was wild.
That is wild. That is really, really amazing. Did you have siblings that experienced this too, or was this just you?
Yeah, I've got a younger sister. She's 3 years younger than me, and my dad ended up having two, which would be my half-sisters now, when I was like 18 or 19. So they didn't experience it quite so much, although they did move with him a couple times, classically. Yeah. And yeah, it was me and my sister for the most part.
Wow. So then, in that mix, you decide I'm going to get married, right? So 10 years ago, in 3 days or 13 days?
13 days.
Like 13 days. I'm glad you keep referencing it like it's written somewhere. Like, don't forget. And I love that. So when you get married, was there any thought of like screw him, I'm not like him, that'll never happen? Or, a lot of people who go through, my parents are still together, but a lot of other people who aren't, there's this kind of like unconscious thought of like, I'm going to repeat the sins of, what I experienced. Or were you like, never, I shall stay forever? Like, how do you take that multiple marriages, multiple moving, multiple kids, all this, and bring that into, when you meet your wife and you're like, yeah, let's start having kids? Yeah,
I was very much the rejection of what I experienced. I said, we both come from so-called broken families or marriages that didn't work. And we were both very intentional about, like, we are going to make this work. And we are going to be, basically the chain breakers of intergenerational trauma or whatever you want to call it. Like, we are going to do this. And I don't know what gave us the gall to be like, oh yeah, we're going to be the ones. Like, we knew nothing. We got it. That's on us, guys. We're good. Yeah, we got this. Imagine we're like 22, 23 years old, never done any like internal work, just like thought we were super smart, thought we knew everything. And thank goodness it worked out. I don't know how it worked out, but man, there's a lot of intentional work that went into that. But it was like, we are going to give our kids the gift that I don't even know what it looks like. I don't know anybody that has gone through a family that didn't have at least a separation, if not a full-on divorce. And so, like, imagine. That must be like it looked in my mind like opening this beautiful present. Like, imagine, I don't even know what's in this amazing box, but I'm going to give it to my kids. And so that was my attitude going in. Like, I'm going to make this work no matter what. And it was like, no thanks to me did it work out in the beginning, for sure. but we ended up figuring it out.
Amazing. And then when you did you begin the conversation of like, let's have kids, or was that just kind of a natural evolution through like, we're married and oh, look at that, we're pregnant. Okay, let's just keep moving forward.
Yeah, well, interestingly, I think we were quite influenced by our environment at this point. We had a number of older friends who were in their later 20s and early 30s, and they were all having kids. And so our initial thought was, well, you get married and you have kids. Like, that's just...
Sure.
Our parents both had children very young. We got married at 23, and we're like, look, we're just going to have kids as soon as possible, and we'd probably like 4 of them, and that's what we thought, naively, right? So, yeah, we very intentionally... my wife got pregnant like 2 months after we were married, and that was intentional, and we were so excited because we had seen these friends of ours who were telling us, like, oh, this is so wonderful, and it's going to be so good, and kids are so important, and, like, looking back, I probably just wanted to like fit in and get going, because I also didn't want the experience that my father had with his second or fourth, depending on how you look at it, family,
right.
going like, he's going to be ancient when they graduate. You know, I don't want to do that. So I decided to front load my responsibility. And that way, you know, by the time I'm 40 or 50, like, you know, I'll be plenty of years left to support my children when they're adults. You know, in a way that I wouldn't have been able to if I was older.
And then was there a massive change of like, you're seeing everyone around you having kids, especially if their kids are a little older, and those parents tend to forget, myself included, about what can be really tough in those early days. And you're like, they have kids and they love kids. You're going to be such a good dad, and your wife's going to be such a great mom, and all this. And then you have a kid. Was there a disconnect of your actual experience? Like, this is terrible. This is hard. This is, you know, all these things. I wish people had been more honest with me.
Man, okay, so here's what happened when we had kids. We were like, oh, here's a good idea. Here's a great idea. Instead of staying here where we live in Calgary in Canada with all these friends who just had kids, we're going to move back to where I come from in Vancouver to be closer to family. And suddenly there's this huge disconnect between our friends telling us one thing and then being like, hey, fam, we're back. And, you know, my wife's parents had just moved back here. My mom was here. My grandparents were here. So we traded friends for family. And that was like probably a big thing. We probably would have liked different support than we received from family. That's neither here nor there, really. But absolutely, man, when it happened, when my son was born, I remember very clearly the moment I first saw him, and I remember very clearly it not being monumental. I was like, I thought this was supposed to be the best day of my life. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I literally don't feel anything right now. And that scared me. It really scared me. I was like, oh, what's wrong with me? I totally
resonate with that. Yeah. And then what's wrong with me? I'm broken. Because everybody told me it's supposed to be this way. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going through it and it's not. So something must be wrong with me. And that's so isolating on top of just the reality of now I got to keep this thing alive, and my life's totally changed. And then you guys moved. You moved on top of that.
We also quit our jobs. We started a new business. What? It was crazy.
What?
I don't know why.
Clearly, you didn't ask anyone. You were just like, you down for this? There's no research. If we research it, we know people will say no, and so we're just going to bounce.
That's so funny that you say that. We did the same thing. We actually spent 2 years living in Thailand when the boys were like 3 and 1 years old. And we lived there for 2 years, traveled a little bit, went to Eastern Europe for a bit. And it was the same sort of thing. We didn't ask anybody. We just told them, like, hey, guys, we're moving to Thailand. They're like, excuse me? And so
can you come feed the dogs? We're going to be gone for 2 years to Thailand.
So it was one of those things that we have since learned people don't typically take too well when they care about you. And so we learned that the hard way, both in just like doing whatever we were going to do, moving here, and then moving to Thailand a few years ago. So that is an interesting thing to pick up on. It's just like, oh yeah, we had to learn. It's actually better to be in communication.
That there's so much value in that. But you know, the other side of that too is, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like the more people you ask, the more differing opinions you're going to get. And so sometimes that's confusing too. Everything from like, here's the baby's name, and someone's like, I wouldn't go with that one, to hey, we're gonna move to this place, or we're gonna start a new business, or everybody's gonna have an opinion and they're entitled to it. But that gets really confusing as the decision maker if you're out there asking a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think our problem was we didn't necessarily trust what we were going to get back from the people who we could have asked, and so we just thought, in our
what's the point?
In our confidence and our naivety or our ignorance, it was like, why? What could we possibly gain when we don't necessarily think these are believable sources to ask in the first place? So we're just going to do what we want.
It'd be like me asking my daughter for investment advice in the stock market.
Precisely.
It's like, I can't really trust what she's going to say anyway, so what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
But who knows? She may nail it. I don't know. All right, so 3 kids in now. First kid. When did that shift happen for you? It wasn't until all 3 kids in terms of like, I need, like, this sucks times 3, and then I don't want this to be the rest of my life?
Third. So
okay.
Pretty close after the second one was born, that's when I started meditating. That's when that thing happened where I caught myself.
Okay. Yep,
and I went deep into that, and I spent like years doing a lot of work, like really getting a lot of crutches, as I would call them, in my life. So I didn't scream so much. So I didn't feel so bad. And there was a point in there, through men's work, through community, through a lot of like somatic work with breath work and meditating and whatnot, that things like flipped in a sense. I finally felt like I wasn't bashing my head against the wall. I had finally like went to bash my head again, and there was no wall. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Like things are, I don't know what it was. And I don't, like, I have this hard time telling this because I really don't want people to go like, oh, he just like, he's bypassing here. Clearly you can't just like get better. Maybe he thinks like he's good now. And like, I'm not saying that I've got my stuff sorted out. I'm saying that I have it way more sorted out than I once did. And it shows in the way that I show up. It shows in that my triggers are like 95% less frequent and significantly less intense. And it shows in the way that I love my wife. It shows in the way that I treat my children. And so what I really enjoy seeing is the difference in how my youngest son and my other ones act, react, and how I treat them. And it's sad in a sense because I go like, oh man, I could have done such a better job with the first 2. But in the latter case, my sort of youngest son, I go, oh my goodness, this is so clear that I actually did get better, because the secure attachment that we have with one another, the gentleness with which we parent him, like just everything is easier. Everything is more loving. Everything is more heart opening. And it's so clear in my mind that this is real, that this work is durable and will last because of those differences in just behavior and actions that we see in the kids.
I think it can be, I'm sure this happens for you because of it's literally your job, but it can be so frustrating. And I don't nail it. I'm attempting fatherhood. That's the whole point here, right? But it can be so frustrating when you hear other people feeling frustrated, feeling like they're at their end of their rope, feeling like there's nowhere else to go, or like this is just the way it has to be. And you want to say it doesn't, though. And everybody's situation is unique and different, right? Their kid could have special needs. They could have a weird job situation. There could be, finances, all these different things that can bring in stressors and changes and variables. But the person that's just kind of like, it is what it is, I think it's just a human coping mechanism. And sometimes it takes someone from the outside to say, but it doesn't. But I've tried that before, and it's not received well. So how do you go about doing that? I mean, clearly it's your job. So, maybe people are more willing to listen to you. I'm my daughter with the stock market versus, you. But, how do you go about telling a dad, like, it doesn't have to be this bad, essentially, or this tough? Not bad, that's not right, but it doesn't have to be this tough. And you can really enjoy what you're doing and really participate and not just get through it. Yeah.
And so for me I just share my story. Like I really try to differentiate myself by saying, like, I do not necessarily know what I'm doing. I do not know what I'm doing in your life, especially. Here's what
I'm not your expert.
Yeah. So the way that I see it is, I've really struggled with this because, like, how am I supposed to make this my business when I want this work for everyone in the world? I literally think that if we gave this to every single man, the world would be like the most peaceful, empathetic, loving, respectful place. And I think it all starts with dads, because we then impact the next generation. So
Yep.
what I see myself as is a man holding a candle in a cave. And if you are lost in the cave and
Beautiful.
you see the candle, and if it looks inviting to you, please come and join me. And, you know, we'll work together. I'll hold space for you, and I'll just share what worked and what I've seen work in the other guys I've worked with. And if you don't like the glow of my candle, if you think it's offensive, if you hate the color, then please bypass the candle, because it's not the right
Go
one for
right
you.
past it, or
Yeah,
go
like
away from it. Whatever.
I don't have the
that's a good way to
answers.
say it.
I don't have the answers at all, but I have figured out my life. And I know
Yeah.
from men's work, sitting in circles long enough, that there are enough men who will resonate with me, because I resonate with so many other men, and go like, oh, I'm not alone. I see myself in you. Maybe I can learn something from you. That's all I
Yeah.
hope, is just like, if you see the candle and you want to join me, come on by. Otherwise, you know, just don't blow it out on the way by, but leave me alone. You know?
Right. No worries. I'm not handing you the candle.
Yeah.
Do you ever get pushback from, like, you know, kids at school? You know, you show up to an event and the mom's like, "Oh my gosh, he's such a good dad," and then that dad's like, "Yeah, he's a professional dad. It's his job, okay?" Like, you ever get any kind of like weird pushback like that?
Oh, dude, I have not yet, but I can't wait for the day that I do. I would love to navigate that, because it's so weird even telling people what this is. And I've literally never thought about it as a professional dad, because I am not a professional dad. But I can't wait, because I was even getting a haircut the other day. She's like, "Oh, what do you do?" It's like, oh my goodness, where do I even begin?
Here we go.
You know, it was just like, it was hard to even say to her. And this is part of my work, you know, like part of my journey now is, how do I respectfully and responsibly step into a leadership role in a sense? And it's not one that I'm like, oh, I want to be a guru. It's like, I can help and I have to take that responsibility. So this is all new for me as well. And I'm going to screw up along the way. So yeah, I haven't had that yet, but man, I can't wait, because I'm sure that'll trigger the hell out of me.
That'll be fantastic. And you'll be like, "Thank you for this moment. I've been waiting for one of these for a while. I need to go call Bradley and let him know it has officially happened."
Yeah.
Well, how has fatherhood changed for you? I mean, clearly you talked about, you know, you're more at peace, you're more involved, you're more connected, right? The connected child is such a great, theology, if you will, of how to love and be with our kids. But how has fatherhood, the definition of it, the expectation of it, adjusted from, you know, day one, baby born, to, you know, kind of where you sit today?
I think the biggest difference is expectation. And so much of where we struggle is our own crushing expectations and the judgments we place on ourselves. And so even though I knew absolutely nothing about parenting when I became a dad, my internal talk to myself was one based in perfectionism. If you screw up, you're a loser. If you do something wrong, everyone will hate you. You have to be perfect. And obviously, being so far from perfect, I spent most of my time in like shame spirals, just thinking that I was no good. And so now, I think I found the grace of self-forgiveness and just been allowed to screw up and forgive myself for where I went wrong, because I was doing my best. And I'm still doing my best. And now, rather than thinking I need to get better because I am broken, I go, I think I can get better because I have potential. And so when I screw up, I apologize. I repair the ruptures. I try and keep like a 1-to-1, rupture to repair ratio now. And I no longer have the expectation that, like, if you screw up, you have to punish yourself, because that took up so much of the time that I could otherwise have been spending with the kids. And so it's much... Yeah. It's still hard for me. I won't lie. Like, being a dad sometimes, I love to work, and not in like, I don't think in a workaholic sort of sense. I just love pursuing my purpose, my passion. And I'm so grateful that I get to do what I love. And I'm sometimes like, do I want to play another Pokemon card game? Like, nah, man, not today.
No, and the answer is no.
Not remotely. And so I struggle with that sort of thing still, but at least I can see that it's okay to feel like that. I can self-validate and then share that with the kids. And so rather than everything being this like existential crisis of, wow, you screwed up, you're an idiot. Same with the kids. Like, my internal talk was the talk I spoke to them, which is really messed up. But I don't condemn myself or them when we screw up. And that's probably been the biggest thing.
That's so powerful. You know, we actually, I noticed in my daughter a perfectionistic nature that I didn't fully accept in myself. I thought I was more mature than that. And my wife, who's really leads on so many levels in terms of emotional intelligence and EQ or whatever that would be, kind of pointed out, like, we're really seeing some frustration with Ellis when it comes to drawing, right? She'd be drawing, mess it up, and throw it down. And she was 4. This was in New York, so she was like 4. And we started thinking about this, and I started thinking through the concept of perfect. I think I was at church, and someone said something about perfect, and and then you hear it in songs and all this, and we were like, wait a second. There is no perfect. By the time you land on perfect, it's changed, it's moved. And so we literally took the word perfect out of our vocabulary at home. We can't even say it's a perfect day. We can't say that's a perfect outfit to wear to the whatever. This is the perfect meal. This is the perfect music to go with, because there is no perfect. So we have literally taken that word out. We can say, this is a great match, or this is excellent, or what a wonderful day. And my hope is my perfectionism was kind of self-created. I didn't see it in my parents, but I think there was a thought of, like, if I do it right, 1 + 1 will equal 2. I will be successful. I will be financially whatever, all these different things. And that meant I had to stay in the straight and narrow, and I had to be perfect. I had to be exact. I had to be precise, because otherwise it's lazy, or it's weak, or it's, that type of thing. And I think it's you as someone who's done a lot of work. I was in therapy. One of the greatest things I ever did when I was in LA for about 3.5 years, and then we did premarital counseling, and that was so vital to really the success, I feel like, of our marriage. But that level, excuse me, of being perfect was something that I just didn't know, and I'm passing that on without even knowing it. And that lacking that self-awareness, all of a sudden, we look at our kids sometimes and we're like, why does he have such an attitude all the time? And it's like, guess where it comes from? Like, yes, there's nature and nurture. So you're in there somewhere, and sometimes you're just not aware of it. So for me, too, I resonate with that concept of perfection.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you said in there that I want to pick up on is awareness, because the meditation wasn't that I was meditating. Like, you can do whatever practice. You could, like, do yoga, you could stretch, you could walk, you could breathe, you could journal, you could pray, you can do literally anything. But the idea is to become more aware and to notice better what is true and what is existing in you and in the external world. And so when we as fathers can become more attuned to what's going on, it becomes much easier to notice what we are doing intentionally versus inertia. And I talked on my podcast to a guy named Dominic Quartuccio, who talks about drift, coming from Napoleon Hill, saying that when you are not paying attention to your life, which I think he says like 95% of what we do in life is just inertia, because how could you use the intellectual capital to do every single thing you needed to do? Like, how do I put my pants on? Let me think about that. Oh, how do I merge into traffic? Let me think about that. You just do it. And at some point, you have to stop and be able to ask yourself, which one of these things is good inertia and which one of these things is actually not the best? Where am I out of alignment with my values? And that's what, like, all this work is about for me, is clearing away all the junk of my inertia, my expectations, my family systems, my traumas, my wounds, and getting to who I truly am, and then noticing when I'm off track. And so can I notice when I am yelling at my kids because it's triggering me, or am I just, like, putting the blame onto them? Can I notice when, like, my wife is becoming more distant because I haven't loved her enough? Can I notice, like, I need to say something because I'm building resentment? How deeply can you notice the physical feelings and sensations that show you where the emotional feelings are that can help you stay in alignment? Because I think, at least in my life, and I've heard a lot of people say this, like, emotions are like the gauge, the dashboard to your life, and they tell you when something is off or on. And if you can notice those well enough, then you can start to do something with them to become a better person, better husband, a better father. And so that's why I always recommend guys get a mindfulness practice to build awareness as, like, number one step in all of this.
Wow. Oh, no worries. Maybe the pods died.
So, well, they should not have, but they must have. Said there was 60% battery left. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
I can
No, that happened. That happened to me the other day too, and I was like, "Oh, did you cut off?" And I was like, "No, my headphones did." Normally they beep. Mine didn't beep this time.
No, mine didn't either. I've literally got a pair of those in the mail right now, and I haven't got them yet. So this is just terrible timing. Sorry.
Come on. Yeah. Checks in the mail.
Yeah.
Checks in the mail. Well, I was going to follow up with what you kind of preempted a little bit too, which was just like, what is the first step for dads? You know, like I think a lot of times dads just don't even look. I am such a, like yourself, I'm such a worker. Someone says push this giant ball, you know, up the hill. I'm going to go. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to pay attention really. I love being focused and going for that. So it's so easy for, like you talked about, like that inertia. So easy for us as dads, unless something kind of bumps us out of it, or we have this like out of body experience, or you know, a loving spouse, or someone says, hey dude, like, what's up? You seem really angry, or you seem frustrated. Sometimes it's small things. Like my wife sometimes will be like, do you need to go for a run right now? Would you like to get out of the house for a little bit? And I'm like, you know, my first instinct is no, I'm fine. And then I'm like, you know what? I do. For me, if you're seeing that, then clearly I need to humble myself and say, yeah, I need to go for a walk. So what is that? It sounds like the first step is kind of that mindfulness, but how do you even get to that point? Like how do you go from your average dad just going through life to get to that?
That's the $1 million question, man. That's what I've been struggling with as well, because it's like there are so many entry points to this work. There is the person who has no idea that they're struggling, no idea that they could be doing better. How do you be like, hey man, do you notice anything that's off? Then there's the guy who sort of knows he's struggling but has no idea why, doesn't know that there's anything to do. Then you've got the guy who knows he's struggling, knows why, but has no idea what to do. And then you've got the guy who knows he's struggling, knows why, knows what to do, but like then he's got to do it. And then you got the guy like deep into the work. There's so many entry points. And what we typically see is that guys don't start doing the work until they're hit by the proverbial Mack truck. And so everything that I'm doing is like I'm really trying to call guys into this work when maybe it's a 2x4 across the head instead of getting hit by the emotional Mack truck where they hit rock bottom. Because guys typically come when they get a divorce, when they get separated, when like they've hit rock bottom, when they're in addiction. And so what I have found is that's actually only about maybe 20 to 30% of the guys who follow me or who join our groups. And the rest have just seen something I've posted and they've gone like, oh, I didn't know that was not normal. I didn't know I wasn't alone. I didn't know there was another way. And so that's why like all of this for me, I got to be honest, I hate being seen. I hate being the face of this because it is so uncomfortable for me. And yet I know I need to because my story is one of hope. And so if I can give a little bit of hope to the guys who are like, oh, I didn't even know that could be possible, then like, great, I'll talk all day and I'll take all the harassment and, you know, internet abuse and shame with people who don't like what I'm saying. Great. Thankfully, there's not a ton of that. But
I was going to say, like, what are the haters saying? Like, no, dads should continue to be disconnected. Like, what are people saying?
So the interesting thing about this is it mostly comes down to what I perceive, and this is just the story I'm coming up with, of people having been so wounded in relationship that they don't trust that this could work, or they don't trust me, or they think like, oh yeah, but you don't know that people are untrustworthy. And so it often comes up in my posts or emails about marriage or joining a men's group, because I often say like, you know, we went through premarital counseling as well, and the message was your spouse should be your number one human relationship. And that's been like our guiding North Star, is like we need to be on our own page first, before the kids, before any of this. And I sometimes get feedback like, oh, well, make sure you don't marry a narcissist, or like, oh, well, that's what they say before they take all your money. And it's like, dude, I'm so sorry that you got hurt like that, but it's not the end all be all. And that means that there's work for you to do, but it doesn't mean that this is wrong. As well as like the power of joining community. I'm saying like, dads, you need brothers, not bros. You need men with whom you can share life, rather than guys who are like, hey man, how's the sports? Or like, hey, don't you wish we could be back in college? Like, no, dude, you don't need
brothers,
that.
Not bros. That's brilliant. That's some of your merch that people should be buying. Brothers, not bros. People would say hoes before bro, or bros before hoes, but brothers, not bros is pretty solid as well. I like that.
Yeah. So guys just seem to have issues around trust and relationship.
Yeah. The power of community. It's huge. That's what started this podcast for me. So I have a couple really tight guy friends, Derek, Chris, and George from college. Every year or so we get together, and it's the anti-bachelor weekend. It's like, how's your relationship with your wife? Like, what's going on with your kids? Like,
that's beautiful.
You know, what are books you're reading? What are podcasts you're listening to? You know, And we joke around and we remember things from the past, but it is an edifying gathering, and I always leave so filled, so like ready to get back out there and do stuff. And so and then I have like a different group of those guys. I'll shout them out because they listen to Adam, Charlie, Adam again, and Hart. And those guys are like, they're the same version of the Chris George Derek, but like the R-rated version. It's still love. It's still, but it's like, I'm not probably sharing all of this on social, But needless to say, I know I've got these guys I can text and I can get to. And my wife has a podcast called Crushed. Why is it the life you like doesn't like you back? Based on a one-woman show, why is it the boys you like don't like you back? So it's a whole relationship thing. But when we were talking about like how we market our podcast and how we get them out there, she's like, oh, well, I've got this text chain of girls that talk about, I've got this text chain of girls, this text chain. And I was like, guys, we just don't do that. It's very hard to get a guy to proactively jump into that. And like most things, though, once you get in, you're like, this is so valuable and so helpful. So
totally.
I know I'm preaching to the choir, but the power of community is so vital. And that's the hope for this podcast. I know it's the hope for what you do as well, which is just essentially, hey, Dad, you're not alone. And there are, for you specifically, talk to Curt. He's got strategies. He's got strategeries, things that you can do to really move this forward. But the reality is just like, know that you're not alone, right?
100%. And that's one of the things I've started is doing a free men's group every month. And so on the last Friday of every month, we just invite guys who might not have heard of it. They might not be ready for it. They might not think that, investing in their own personal development is worth it because they don't come from that. And man, it is incredible. Some of the guys we had last month, they're just like, I had no idea what I was signing up for, and like I want so much more. And so I was like, okay, let's just create a text. So we got on Telegram, created a channel. We just like started a group from that. And same with our weekly men's groups. We have a very dedicated channel text-wise, and we just check in. And we just go like, hey guys, this is what's happening. Like, can you please support me? Can I get some feedback? What do you think of this? Or like, here, just share a win. When was the last time you were able to like shame-free share a win and have guys like, yes, amazing, man, rather than being like, who is this guy over here? Like, oh, don't go pat your own back, bro. Yeah. But these are like genuinely supportive, have your back brothers. And we've only been meeting in some of these groups for like a month. And it's insane the power of connection, what they can do. And the guys are just like so grateful. And I'm so grateful to be in there with them because I'm getting it right back. I am being supported from these men. And it's like, that's what I want in my life. And so I create it and these guys come and if I knew about this 10 years ago, it would have been a different life. And I'm glad that it's all led to here, but man, I'm so excited to be able to do this now.
Well, lest our listeners think that you are the perfect dad, what is a thing in your fathering that you find that you really are the weakest at, or something that you are so consciously trying to adjust and shift?
Well, where do I begin? Still in
just one. That's all. I know there's a lot. The self-aware dad has plenty, but clearly,
millions.
Because I don't want dads to be like, oh man, like this guy's done all this work and he's done this, so now he's gotten to this like upper level of like like loving every moment of fatherhood. And you mentioned like sometimes I just don't want to play Pokemon, but is there something else kind of in your fathering that can humanize your experience with all these guys struggling too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad you asked that. Like for me, still the biggest thing is a propensity to anger quickly and impatience and a desire, maybe not a desire, but like a propensity to treat my children like they're adults. And there is a really wonderful poem, short story, something called Father Forgets, that I've been passing around in the men's groups, and it talks about how this father trying to treat his son like a man to make sure he doesn't get hurt, to grow up as a solid, strong man with great virtues, ends up hurting him anyway because he's actually a boy. And so my overreach sometimes, my quickness to anger, my impatience has me disconnected from them more often than I would like. And while it is less significant than it used to be, it still comes up at least a few times a week. And it sucks because I'm still, like even 2 nights ago, the kids were at each other in bed. And I was like, just get into your own beds. You will read stories. And then, instead of just saying like, hey, can you get off my bed? There, a foot comes out, flying kick, And it's like, oh my goodness, instead of just talking, here you are starting a fight. And so I see that as this huge trigger in me. And instead of being like, oh, I see you were kicked, how does that make you feel? Let's talk about that. Hey, I'm not going to let you kick and do all like the right mindful parenting stuff. I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Get out of there. I can't believe you do this. How dare you? And then I catch myself and it's like, oh man, there's still so much to do. And there's so much repair to do. And I guess that's like, maybe that's the hope. Like, yes, you get to screw up, maybe just as much, but man, it takes like minutes instead of days to come back from it. Usually. So
that's good.
For me,
no,
anger is still the biggest thing, man.
I love that. I think we all have that to some degree within us. I didn't even know I had it until I had kids, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, I got some anger in me.
Yeah.
Need to talk that through. Need to figure that one out. Well, as we wrap it up here, man, leave our dads with some Dadvice, something that can encourage our dads out there and keep them going.
I will say maybe two things. One is I am so serious about the mindfulness stuff. If you can get out of your head and into your body more often, move, exercise, breathe, meditate, it will make everything better. And even with my anger, for example, I can now see it coming a mile away rather than being so numb to my body that I don't see it until I'm already screaming. It's like, oh, I can notice, I can do some practices, I can breathe, I can go away, I can do all these things to not make it blow up. And the other thing is just like, there's always hope. Like, I was at the door of Googling ways to kill myself because I thought I was so bad for my family that they would be better off without me. Okay, so I'm not talking about like, oh, I kind of yelled at them once in a while, I was kind of bad. Like, no, I was brutal. I was so bad at parenting and so bad at being self-compassionate and loving that I was at that door, and it was some grace that had me go like, well, just try one more day. Like, who knows? I'm perpetually optimistic and just optimistic enough to have got through another day, which was wonderful because, man, that would have been a huge mistake. And so I only share that as a message of hope, because if I can get from there, like, I know you listening, if you are really struggling right now, you probably feel like you're worse off than I was. I get it, but it's never worth doing something like that, because your kids, no matter how bad you think you are, what they need is you, and they need you to get better, and they need you to feel better, and they need you to be present, they need you to love yourself. And all of these things are possible, and I would not have said that 5, 6, 7 years ago before I saw it happen in my life. So I just want to leave like a hopeful message before we end, that no matter where you're at, you can always get and feel better, and it's never too late. That's what I thought too. I was like, there's no point. My kids are past the 5-year-old age limit where they get all this like good stuff in their bodies and their nervous system. What's the point? But there is a point. So don't give up.
That's so good. You got me inspired, man. I'm like, I want to sit down and meditate for a little bit and calm myself. I've started adding like 20 minutes or so of time in the morning, get up a little bit earlier before I start engaging. And that has made a big difference for myself. Just instead of like rolling out of bed and getting right to making breakfast for my daughter and helping change diaper, and my wife comes out and then just the day begins. So I love that, man. I appreciate your time so much, Curt. This is amazing. You've inspired me. Hopefully the people listening as well. So I just wanted to say thank you, Curt, for attempting fatherhood.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Hey, dads, just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you so much for supporting Attempting Fatherhood. This has been such a fun project, and I hope it's encouraging you and informing you and bringing a sense of community to the dadhood, the fatherhood, the dad life. And the only way that really happens is by you guys getting involved. So make sure you're following us on Instagram, Attempting Fatherhood, subscribing to this podcast, and just as important as those things, share this podcast with other dads, because that's how you build that community. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.